My wealthy uncle learned that I was living in my car while juggling 2 jobs to pay for college. Meanwhile, my bedroom was converted into a gym, and my trust fund kept their company afloat. Can you even imagine being 27 years old, a college student, and spending 3 brutal months sleeping in your car, working 2 jobs, just to survive? My inheritance, my entire future, systematically stolen by the very woman my father trusted. I was utterly alone, exhausted, and barely holding on. But then, one ordinary morning, a ghost from my past walked into the coffee shop where I worked, and that moment, that single encounter, changed everything. Let me take you back to a time before all that, before the cars and the coffee shops. I grew up in a home that was just filled with love. My early childhood memories are drenched in warmth, in laughter, in this incredible feeling of security. My dad, David, was a self-made man, a construction supply company owner who worked hard but always made time for me. Sundays were sacred: pancakes, the park, movies. Simple, but they were everything. My mom, Catherine, was the absolute heart of our home. She had this magical way of making everyone feel special. She volunteered at my school, knew all my friends, never missed a single performance. Her chocolate chip cookies? Legendary. Our house was the gathering place, filled with family and friends. I still remember helping her plant flowers in her beautiful backyard. She used to tell me that watching things grow taught patience and appreciation for life. We lived comfortably, a 4-bedroom house with a big yard. Nothing extravagant, but we never wanted for anything. My bedroom was lavender, my favorite color, and Dad built me this cozy window seat where I'd get lost in books for hours. Every birthday, they'd secretly decorate the house, so I'd wake up to streamers and balloons. Those little gestures? They weren't just gestures. They screamed, "We love you." My dad had an older brother, my Uncle Walter. He was super successful in real estate, lived in a mansion, traveled a lot. But despite their different worlds, Dad and Uncle Walter were incredibly close. They had this Thursday lunch tradition that lasted for years. Uncle Walter never had kids, so he absolutely doted on me. For my 10th birthday, he took our whole family to Disney World. Still, my favorite memory. Family holidays were always so special. Thanksgiving at our place, Christmas at Uncle Walter's grand house. Mom would cook for days before Thanksgiving, filling our home with the most amazing smells. Uncle Walter's Christmas parties? Elegant, with a tree that touched the ceiling and gifts for everyone. I felt like I was part of something so much bigger, something with history. What I didn't know then was that my dad was also meticulously planning my future. The day I was born, he set up a trust fund for my education. Every single month, he'd add to it, sometimes sacrificing his own comforts, just to watch it grow. It was meant to cover not just undergrad, but graduate school too, if I wanted. He was so determined that I'd have opportunities he never did. He'd always tell me, "Education is the one thing nobody can ever take away from you, Sammy." He dreamed of seeing me graduate, the first in our family to do so. But then, everything shattered. I was 12. Mom started getting these terrible headaches that just wouldn't go away. Weeks of scary symptoms, then the diagnosis: aggressive, inoperable brain tumor. Doctors gave her 6 months. She fought for 8. Those 8 months, they turned our happy, vibrant home into a place of whispers, of medication schedules, of visiting nurses. The medical bills piled up so fast, even with insurance. Dad started working longer, harder, trying to cover it all, but still desperate to be there for Mom and me. I'd overhear him at night on the phone, negotiating with insurance, with hospitals, trying to shield me, but I saw the worry etched deeper into his face every day. I grew up so fast during that time. While other 12-year-olds were having sleepovers, I was learning to check Mom's meds, to help her to the bathroom, to be strong when she couldn't be. Dad taught me to cook simple meals, do laundry, keep the house running. We became a team, just us two, united in our love for Mom and our fierce determination to make her comfortable. Mom died in the spring, when the garden she loved was just starting to bloom. The day of her funeral was deceptively beautiful, clear blue skies, trees in flower. It felt so wrong, the world looking so lovely when our hearts were utterly broken. Uncle Walter stood with us at the cemetery, his hand on Dad's shoulder. Both of them looked years older than they had just months before. The months that followed were a blur of raw grief. Dad just threw himself into work, coming home late, his eyes red from crying in private. I'd have dinner waiting for him, a skill I'd perfected during Mom's illness. We rarely spoke about our loss directly. But sometimes, we'd just sit together, looking through photo albums, sharing quiet memories of Mom. Those evenings, as painful as they were, strengthened our bond. Even as we struggled, Uncle Walter became more distant. He'd still come for occasional dinners, remember my birthday, but those regular Thursday lunches with Dad? They just stopped. I learned later that Walter had actually disagreed with some of Dad's decisions about Mom's medical care, creating a huge rift between the brothers. Dad never spoke ill of Walter, but their once unbreakable connection was clearly fractured. Despite all the grief and the changes, Dad and I found a new normal. We kept some of Mom's traditions alive, made new ones of our own. I excelled in school, knowing it would make both my parents proud. And Dad, even through those financially tight times after Mom's medical expenses, kept adding to my education fund. Life was different, yes, sadder, but we were managing. Together. 2 years after Mom died, Dad introduced me to Diana. They met at a business function. She worked in marketing for one of his clients. Diana was attractive, polished, seemed so genuinely interested in me. She asked about my school, my friends, my hobbies, with what seemed like sincere curiosity. After months of seeing Dad so lonely and withdrawn, it was a relief to see him smile again. Diana had 2 kids from a previous marriage, Brandon, 17, tall, athletic, just like his mom, and Zoe, 15, a year older than me, artistic and quiet. Our first dinner together? Everyone was on their absolute best behavior. Brandon asked Dad about his business, Zoe complimented my necklace, and Diana made sure everyone felt included. I remember thinking, wow, this might actually work. We could become a real family. 6 months after they met, Dad and Diana got married in a small ceremony. I was happy for him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was moving way too fast. Still, I wanted to be supportive. Diana and her children moved into our house, and suddenly, our quiet home was busy and full again. Brandon took the guest room, and Zoe moved into the small office Dad converted for her. At first, the changes were subtle. When Dad was around, Diana was warm, inclusive. She'd ask about my day, compliment my achievements, bring me into family discussions. But the moment Dad left for work, it was like a switch flipped. Her smile wouldn't reach her eyes. Her questions became more like interrogations, and she'd start comparing me, unfavorably, to Zoe. Brandon and Zoe picked up on her cues immediately. They weren't overly mean, just increasingly dismissive. They'd make plans without me, have inside jokes I wasn't part of, subtly rearrange our living space to fit their preferences. My opinion on household matters? It gradually became irrelevant. Then, one day, I came home from school to find my childhood bedroom half cleared out, making room for Zoe's art supplies. Your room has the best light, Diana explained with this thin, unsettling smile. And you 2 girls should be sharing anyway. It'll help you bond. Dad, bless his heart, thought it was a great idea, especially since Diana had presented it as something she and I had agreed upon. Soon, photos of my mother started disappearing from the common areas. When I asked, Diana just said they'd been carefully stored away. It's not healthy to dwell in the past, sweetie, she'd coo. We need to focus on our new family now. The Christmas ornaments Mom and I had collected together? They mysteriously never made it out of storage that first holiday season. Our traditional family recipes? Replaced with Diana's. Our customs? Discarded for new ones. Dad was working longer hours than ever. Diana actually encouraged it, telling him how impressive his work ethic was. You go be the provider, honey, she'd say. I'll take care of everything at home. And she did take care of things, all right. reshaping our home, our routines, to her liking, all while Dad was absent. Money became this constant topic between them. I'd overhear Diana discussing the business, suggesting changes, mentioning expenses. The children's activities are so important, but so costly, she'd lament. Or Brandon needs a car for college next year. Dad would agree to whatever she suggested, seemingly grateful for her interest. Meanwhile, my activities became less and less of a priority. When I needed money for a school trip, Diana would question if it was necessary. College is expensive, Samantha, she'd lecture. We need to be saving, not spending on frivolous things. She said this, knowing full well about my education fund, the one Dad specifically said was for such expenses. The distance between Dad and me grew wider. Diana was brilliant at creating small conflicts, then positioning herself as the peacemaker. Samantha is at that difficult age, she'd tell Dad when I'd express any disagreement. All teenagers go through this rebellious phase. She'd twist my behavior, making it seem hurtful to our new family dynamic, leaving Dad torn. Despite all these challenges, I desperately tried to cling to my relationship with Dad. I'd wake up early on Saturdays to have breakfast with him before anyone else was awake. We'd talk about school, his work, sometimes even reminisce about Mom. But these moments became increasingly rare as Diana started scheduling family activities that effectively eliminated our private time. I tried to be understanding. Dad seemed happy, or at least content. He'd been so sad for so long after Mom died, and I was so reluctant to do anything that might disrupt his newfound stability. So I adapted. I kept my head down, focused on school, and just looked forward to college, when I could finally have my own space again. Around a year after the marriage, the family business started showing signs of trouble. Dad began bringing work home, spending evenings surrounded by paperwork, his face etched with worry. Diana would bring him coffee, massage his shoulders, assuring him she was there to help. She even started accompanying him to business meetings, positioning herself as his partner in all things. By the time I was 16, I felt like a literal guest in my own home. My bedroom, now shared with Zoe, had been completely redecorated to her taste. Family meals revolved around Brandon's sports schedule and Zoe's art classes. My achievements at school were acknowledged, sure, but they were always quickly overshadowed by updates on Diana's children. It was painfully clear who the real family was. And I wasn't truly part of it. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, my junior year of high school. I was in chemistry class when the school secretary appeared at the door, her face so somber. In the office, Principal Martinez told me, accident. Dad. He'd been driving to a client meeting, another driver ran a red light, hit his car at full speed. Critical condition, Boston Memorial Hospital. Diana was already there when I arrived, Brandon and Zoe beside her. She was talking to the doctors, her voice composed, authoritative. She barely acknowledged me, just a brief nod before turning back to the conversation. The doctor was using words like internal bleeding, minimal brain activity. I stood frozen, unable to process. They let me see him. Just briefly. Dad was connected to so many machines, his face bruised beyond recognition. I held his hand, still warm but unresponsive, and just whispered. I told him I loved him. I reminded him of our beach trip last summer, how we built sandcastles like we used to when I was little. I promised to make him proud. I don't know if he heard me. But I needed to say it. 3 hours later. He was gone. Just like that. My father, my rock, my last remaining parent. Ripped from this world. I was 17 years old. And completely alone. The hospital waiting room blurred into a haze of faces and voices. Uncle Walter appeared briefly, looking utterly shocked, older than I'd ever seen him. He hugged me so tightly and whispered, "I'm so sorry, Samantha." But Diana, quick as a flash, intercepted him, pulling him aside for a private, hushed conversation. I didn't see him again until the funeral. The days that followed were surreal. Diana took charge of everything for the funeral, rarely consulting me. The service was at a church Dad had never even attended, with a minister who'd never met him. Diana chose an expensive casket, elaborate flowers, presenting herself as the devastated widow. During the service, she gave this tearful speech about their brief but passionate marriage, positioning herself and her children prominently as the grieving family. I sat there in the front row, numb, utterly disconnected. This didn't feel like a tribute to my father. There was no mention of his love for jazz, his terrible dad jokes, his heart-shaped pancakes on Valentine's Day. The man being eulogized felt like a stranger. Uncle Walter was there, but he kept his distance from Diana. After the service, he came to me, pressing a card into my hand. "Call me when things settle down," he said quietly. "We need to talk." Before I could respond, Diana was at my side, steering me towards some distant relatives offering condolences. His words, "we need to talk," were a tiny flicker of hope in an otherwise dark void. 3 days after the funeral, we met with Dad's lawyer for the reading of the will. And that's where the true horror began. I learned that Dad had updated his will shortly after marrying Diana. The family business? Left to her, with this vague understanding that it would pass to me eventually. The house? Also Diana's, though I could live there until I finished college. But the real kick in the gut? My education trust fund was still intact, substantial enough for an elite university and grad school. But Diana? She was named the sole trustee until my 25th birthday. There was another, separate inheritance for me at 25, a solid foundation for my adult life. Diana just nodded through the entire meeting, occasionally squeezing my hand. It looked like support, but her grip was too tight, almost possessive. Leaving the lawyer's office, she immediately started talking about managing these assets responsibly during difficult economic times. The change in Diana was immediate and utterly complete. That very evening, she called a family meeting. Brandon and Zoe sat on either side of her, a united front. I sat alone, in what had once been Dad's favorite armchair. "Now that the formalities are behind us," Diana began, her voice cold, businesslike, "we need to discuss practical arrangements. Samantha, you will be moving to the smaller bedroom upstairs. Brandon needs your room since he will be commuting to college in the fall, and he needs the space for his workout equipment and study area." I protested. "But that's my childhood bedroom. It's full of memories." Her expression hardened. "This house belongs to me now, and I will decide how the space is used. Your father would want what is best for all of us, not just you." That night, Brandon and Zoe helped their mother move my belongings. Not to another bedroom, but to the converted attic room, sloped ceilings, no heating, just a cramped space. Many of my things mysteriously didn't make the transition, keepsakes from my mom, photos of our original family. Within weeks, every visible trace of my parents' life together was erased. Family photos replaced with new ones featuring Diana, her children, and occasionally my father. It was like Mom had never existed, like my own childhood had been edited out of the family narrative. The atmosphere at home grew increasingly hostile. Diana would dissect everything, from my appearance to my study habits. "Your father worked himself to death providing for you," she'd sneer. "The least you could do is show some gratitude and respect for this family." Zoe, though less overtly mean, was clearly aligned with her mom, reporting my every coming and going like I was under surveillance. Diana took absolute control of my expenses, demanding receipts and justifications for everything. School supplies, clothes, everything. "As trustee, I have a fiduciary responsibility," she'd remind me. "Your father trusted me to make wise decisions with his money." Basic necessities became luxuries. I had to justify my needs while Brandon received a brand new car for college and Zoe attended an expensive summer art program. My final year of high school became an exercise in pure endurance. I spent every possible moment at school, joining clubs, study groups, anything to avoid going home. I found a part-time job at a local bookstore, saving every single dollar in a private account Diana knew nothing about. I focused intensely on my studies, praying for a scholarship that would give me some independence from her financial chokehold. The emotional abuse was relentless, but it was subtle enough that outsiders would never notice. Diana never laid a hand on me, but her words, they cut deeper than any physical blow ever could. She'd remind me I was only in her home because of Dad's charity, that I was a burden she'd graciously accepted. She'd tear me down, compare me to her kids, minimize every single one of my achievements. Through it all, I held on to one thought: this was temporary. College. That would be my escape. A chance to build a life away from Diana and her children. I applied to universities, both near and far, hoping for scholarships to supplement my trust fund. Each acceptance letter felt like a promise of freedom, a tiny light at the end of a very dark tunnel. My acceptance to Northeastern University should have been pure joy. It was my dream school, an excellent business management program. When that thick envelope arrived, I opened it alone in my cramped attic room, tears streaming down my face as I read the congratulatory letter. For a moment I could almost feel Dad's hand on my shoulder, hear his voice saying, "I knew you could do it, Sammy." The reality check came fast when I shared the news with Diana. She barely glanced at the letter, her expression utterly unimpressed. "Northeastern is very expensive," she said. "I'm not sure your trust can cover that, especially with the business struggling. Perhaps you should consider community college for the first 2 years." I stood my ground, reminding her that Dad had specifically saved for my education at a good university. The trust fund was more than adequate. Diana reluctantly agreed, but made it crystal clear: every expense will be scrutinized. As trustee, I need to ensure the money lasts all 4 years. There will be no extravagances. The battle for each semester's tuition became a grueling ordeal. Diana demanded extensive documentation and justification for every fee. Basic textbooks were questioned as unnecessary expenses. When I needed a laptop for coursework, she insisted I use the family's ancient desktop instead. Each financial discussion ended with her reminding me how generous she was being, how grateful I should be for her careful management of family resources. Despite these daily struggles, those first 2 years at Northeastern offered a desperate, welcome reprieve. I lived in a dorm, sharing a tiny room with another freshman, Jessica, who became a true friend. That cramped space? It was paradise compared to the hostile environment of what had once been my home. I threw myself into my studies, joined student organizations, just desperate to build a life independent of Diana's suffocating influence. I limited my visits home to the bare minimum. Each return was harder than the last. Diana would spend the first hour cataloging all the ways I'd disappointed her, followed by glowing reports of Brandon excelling in business school, Zoe flourishing in her art program. My room? It was progressively emptied, more of my things relegated to boxes in the garage each time I returned. The summer after sophomore year, I found an internship that allowed me to stay in Boston. Diana was displeased, but couldn't argue with the professional experience. That summer gave me my first taste of true independence, managing my own apartment sublet, my own budget, without Diana's poisonous interference. Then my junior year. Everything changed again. Diana called me back to the house for what she called an important financial discussion. Sitting at the dining room table, surrounded by spreadsheets, she calmly explained that the family business was in trouble. "The economy has hit us hard," she stated, despite the fact I'd read the construction industry was booming. "We need to make some difficult decisions about expenses." That difficult decision? A dramatic reduction in my educational funding. Diana claimed the trust had been underperforming, that they needed to reallocate resources temporarily. My tuition would still be covered, she said, but housing, books, all my living expenses? Suddenly, they were my responsibility. When I asked to see the trust account statements, she became defensive. "I don't appreciate your lack of trust, Samantha. Your father appointed me as trustee because he knew I would make responsible decisions. If you cannot accept that, perhaps you should pay for college entirely on your own." Desperate for answers, I consulted a legal aid office at the university. The student lawyer I spoke with was concerned, but explained that challenging a trustee required concrete evidence of mismanagement, and legal resources I simply didn't have. Without access to the actual financial records, there was little I could do except try to adapt. I picked up extra shifts at the campus bookstore, found a second job waiting tables at a nearby restaurant. My grades suffered. I was balancing 2 jobs, full-time classes, and constant exhaustion. But I was absolutely determined to finish my degree. I cut every possible expense, eating most meals at work, buying used textbooks. When summer came again, I had no choice but to return to Diana's house, temporarily, while I looked for affordable housing near campus. What I found when I got there, it shocked me to my core. My bedroom. My childhood bedroom. It had been completely converted into a home gym. An expensive treadmill, a weight set, all brand new. No bed. No desk. No sign I'd ever lived there. My remaining possessions? Boxed up and moved to the garage, many damaged by moisture, others missing entirely. When I confronted Diana, she actually seemed surprised by my reaction. "You are hardly ever here," she said dismissively. "It made no sense to keep a room empty when Brandon needs a place to work out. You can sleep on the sofa while you are visiting." That evening, as I sorted through my damp, mildewed boxes in the garage, I overheard a conversation between Diana and Brandon in the kitchen. They didn't know I was within earshot. "The trust fund has been a lifesaver," Diana was saying. "Without it, we would have lost the business last year." My blood ran cold. "How much longer can we keep using it?" Brandon asked. "Until she turns 25 or graduates. The terms are specific, but I've been careful, moving small amounts at a time. By the time she could challenge anything, the money will be fully integrated into the business." "What if she figures it out?" Brandon asked. "She has no proof, and no resources to fight us legally. Your father was meticulous about the paperwork. On paper, everything looks legitimate, investments that didn't perform as expected." I felt physically ill. They were systematically stealing my inheritance. The money Dad had carefully saved for my future. The business trouble? It was a fabricated excuse, a smokescreen to appropriate my trust fund for their own benefit. I had been so naive, so foolishly trusting Diana to honor her legal and moral obligations as trustee. That night, sleeping on the uncomfortable sofa in what had once been my home, I made a decision. A powerful, terrifying decision. I would not confront Diana directly. Not yet. I would find a way to support myself completely, document everything I could, and build an airtight case for when I finally had the resources to fight back. I would not give her any reason to cut me off entirely from what little remained of my trust fund. The next morning, I calmly told Diana I'd found summer housing back in Boston with friends. It was a lie. A desperate, necessary lie. I needed to escape before my anger, my pain, betrayed me. I packed what little I could salvage from the garage, said a cold goodbye to a family that had never truly accepted me, and drove back to the city with no real plan. Just survival. My first night in my car, parked in a Walmart lot on the outskirts of Boston, was a terrifying wake-up call. Every rustle, every passing car felt like a threat. My trusty Honda Civic, a 16th birthday gift from Dad, was my only home now. I crammed my few possessions into the back seat and trunk, creating a tiny sleeping space in the reclined driver's seat. The fall semester was still 2 months away. I needed work. I needed a routine. I needed to become invisible. My meager savings wouldn't last. The next morning, I signed up for a 24-hour fitness center. $30 a month for clean showers, restrooms, a place to just exist during bad weather. I learned to arrive at 5:30 a.m., when it was nearly empty. Shower, change, prepare for the day. Undetected. Finding safe parking spots became an art form. I rotated between the Walmart lot, quiet residential streets near the university, sometimes a mall garage. Never more than 2 nights in one place. Hospital parking lots were surprisingly good in emergencies. Always activity, always security. I landed a job at a coffee shop near campus, opening at 6 a.m. The early shift suited my new sleeping schedule, and the manager loved my eagerness. Tips were decent, and I got free coffee, discounted food. More importantly, it gave me a legitimate place to be during the day. For evenings and weekends, I picked up shifts at a clothing store in the mall. Between the two, I was working nearly 70 hours a week. Little time to dwell. Every dollar? Straight into a new bank account. Diana knew nothing about it. I was building my own safety net. The physical toll was immense. My back ached constantly from sleeping in that car seat. Boston summers were stifling, heat, humidity. Sleep was a battle. I'd crack the windows for air, but security was always a worry. Rainstorms were the worst, soaking everything, making the car perpetually damp. I developed systems for everything. Clothes and space-saving vacuum bags in the trunk. A small cooler for perishables, refreshed daily with ice from the coffee shop. My laptop and documents? Always with me in my backpack. Laundry? Weekly at a laundromat, using the time to study. Personal hygiene was an exercise in creativity. Dry shampoo was essential. Baby wipes for quick cleanups. I kept my appearance meticulously neat, knowing that looking disheveled would raise questions. I rotated my limited wardrobe so coworkers wouldn't notice I wore the same few outfits. The library became my sanctuary. Air-conditioned, quiet, free. A place to study, use Wi-Fi, just exist in comfort. I'd arrive when it opened, often stay until closing. The librarians came to know me as a dedicated student, never suspecting I had nowhere else to go. Finding restrooms was a constant concern. I mapped every public facility with decent privacy and cleanliness. Coffee shops, bookstores, certain fast food joints became my reliable stops. Meals were planned for maximum economy. Breakfast from the coffee shop, usually discarded leftovers. Lunch, something non-refrigerated like peanut butter sandwiches. Dinner, a ready-made salad from the grocery store, eaten in my car or on a park bench. As summer progressed, I became proficient at this nomadic existence. But the loneliness, it was crushing. I spoke to people all day at my jobs, but I could never share my truth. My college friends were away for the summer. I avoided their calls rather than lie directly. Pride and shame kept me isolated, fiercely determined to solve my problems independently. When fall semester began, I added classes to my already overwhelming schedule. I arranged my work around my course load, rushing from morning classes to afternoon shifts, studying late into the night in empty campus buildings before returning to my car to sleep. My professors noticed. My work, once exemplary, was now just adequate. I looked perpetually tired. My class participation diminished. Dr. Patel, my marketing professor, a particularly observant woman, asked me to stay after class one day. "Samantha, is everything all right? Your last paper wasn't up to your usual standard, and you seem exhausted." I fabricated a story about working extra hours for grad school, thanking her, assuring her I was managing. Dr. Patel didn't seem convinced, but didn't press. She did, however, extend the deadline for my next assignment. A small kindness that brought me to tears once I was alone. As autumn turned colder, new challenges emerged. My car's heater worked, but running it all night would guzzle precious gas. I invested in a high-quality sleeping bag, layered my clothes. On the very coldest nights, I'd splurge on a cheap motel room, justifying it as necessary for my health. I became an expert at campus resources, microwaves in the student center, lockers in the rec building, computer labs for assignments. I took advantage of every free event with food, often wrapping extra portions to save for later. Through it all, I maintained my facade of normalcy. To my classmates and coworkers, I was just another hard-working student, perhaps more dedicated than most. No one suspected that after my shifts ended, I had no home to return to. No bed of my own. No family supporting my efforts. I had been living this grueling double life for over 3 months. And that's when fate intervened. In the form of Uncle Walter. It was a busy morning shift at the coffee shop. Hair pulled back, uniform crisp, a practiced smile plastered on my face. The rush was finally dying down when a familiar voice ordered a simple black coffee. I looked up, and my heart stopped. Frozen in shock. It was Uncle Walter. Older, grayer than I remembered, but unmistakably him. He seemed just as surprised, staring at me with furrowed brows. "Samantha? Is that really you?" I nodded, suddenly acutely aware of how thin I'd become, how exhausted I must look despite all my efforts to appear normal. "Hello, Uncle Walter. It's been a while." He stepped aside to let other customers order, waiting patiently until my coworker could cover for me. Then he motioned me to a corner table. My manager, sensing a potential family reunion, waved me off for a brief break. "What are you doing working here?" Walter asked, his tone concerned, not judgmental. "I thought you'd be focused on your studies. Diana mentioned you were doing well at Northeastern." The mention of Diana's name sent a searing wave of anger through me. "When do you speak to Diana?" I bit out. "Rarely. A courtesy call about the business, occasionally. We are not close." He studied my face. So carefully. "Samantha, you look exhausted. Is everything all right?" Perhaps it was the genuine concern in his voice, or the sheer weight of months of pretending. But something in me just broke. Tears welled up, burning hot, and I quickly wiped them away, embarrassed to be crying at work. "I get off at 2, I said quietly, my voice raw. "Could we talk then?" Walter nodded, his expression serious. "I will come back. We definitely need to talk." Those 4 hours were the longest of my life. When my shift finally ended, Walter was waiting in his sleek luxury car, which made my weathered Honda Civic look even more pathetic. He suggested we go somewhere for lunch, and I directed him to a small cafe I knew was reasonably priced. Over sandwiches, the whole story just poured out of me. The slow, insidious takeover of my home after Dad died. Diana's ruthless control of my trust fund. The sickening moment I found my bedroom converted into a gym. The overheard conversation about her systematically stealing my money to save her business. My current, desperate living situation, in my car. Working 2 jobs, just trying to keep up with studies. Walter listened without a single interruption, his expression darkening with each new, heartbreaking detail. When I finally finished, he was silent for a long moment, hands clasped tightly on the table. "I had no idea," he finally said, his voice tight with barely suppressed rage. "I knew Diana and I had our differences, but I never imagined she would do this to you, to David's daughter." He shook his head slowly. "I should have stayed more involved after your father died. This is partly my fault." "You couldn't have known," I insisted, suddenly feeling lighter, having finally shared my unbearable burden. Walter reached across the table and firmly took my hand. His voice was resolute. "This ends today, Samantha. No niece of mine is going to live in her car while that woman misappropriates her inheritance. Come with me. Right now." Uncle Walter's reaction was immediate. And absolutely decisive. After lunch, he insisted on seeing my car. His face grew grim as he took in my perfectly organized, yet undeniably makeshift, living arrangement. My few possessions, carefully stowed. A small pillow and blanket on the reclined driver's seat. A cooler with a few perishable items. "This is unacceptable," he said firmly. "Pack whatever you need for tonight. You are coming to my house immediately." I hesitated. My pride, my fiercely independent spirit, battled with this desperate, overwhelming need. "I don't want to be a burden," I whispered. Walter's expression softened. He put a hand on my shoulder. "You are family, Samantha. The only family I have left. You could never be a burden." His voice caught slightly. "Your father, he would be heartbroken to see you living like this. Please let me help you." That night, for the first time in months, I slept in a Rio bed. Uncle Walter's house was just as grand as I remembered, a sprawling estate in Boston's most exclusive neighborhood. He gave me a guest suite, my own bathroom, fresh towels, and even a spare set of pajamas his housekeeper found. The sheer luxury felt overwhelming after months of deprivation. Over breakfast the next morning, Walter laid out his plan. I've already called my attorney. We're meeting him at 10 a.m. I want you to tell him exactly what you told me yesterday. Every detail you can remember about Diana's management of your trust. Walter's attorney, Mr. Greenberg, was this sharp-featured man with piercing eyes, a reputation as one of Boston's most formidable litigators. He listened intently as I recounted my entire story, taking detailed notes, occasionally asking for clarification. Based on what you have described, he said, when I finished, we have strong grounds to petition for Diana's removal as trustee. The conversion of trust assets for personal or business use is a serious breach of fiduciary duty. The court takes a very dim view of trustees who commingle funds or use them for unauthorized purposes. What about the things Diana said about investments not performing well? I asked. Mr. Greenberg smiled thinly. Financial records do not lie, Miss Roberts. If Diana has been transferring money from your trust to the business, there will be a paper trail. My forensic accountant will find it. The investigation moved quickly. Mr. Greenberg obtained a court order for all records related to my trust fund and the family business. Walter insisted I focus on my studies while they handled the legal aspects, offering me a place in his home for as long as I needed. I finally reduced my work hours to a manageable level, keeping only the coffee shop job, the one I actually enjoyed. 2 weeks later, Mr. Greenberg called us in for a meeting. Spread across his desk were financial statements, bank records, business documents. His expression was grim, but there was also this deep satisfaction. We found it, he said without preamble. Over the past 3 years, Diana has systematically diverted funds from Samantha's trust into the family business. The transfers were disguised as investments, but there was never any formal loan agreement or equity exchange. The business has been operating at a loss for years, and Diana has been using the trust as a personal slush fund. The numbers were staggering. Nearly $200,000 had been siphoned from my education trust, leaving less than a quarter of what should have been available. In addition, Diana had been paying herself an excessive trustee fee and using trust assets to cover personal expenses for herself and her children. This goes beyond civil violations, Mr. Greenberg continued. There is enough evidence here for criminal charges of fraud and embezzlement. The question is how you want to proceed. Walter looked to me. This is your decision, Samantha. We can pursue criminal charges, or we can focus on recovering your assets through civil action. Either way, Diana will be removed as trustee immediately. I thought about Diana, Brandon, and Zoe, who had systematically pushed me out of my own home and stolen my inheritance. I thought about sleeping in my car through the scorching summer heat and the biting autumn chill. I thought about working until my hands cracked and my feet blistered, all while they lived comfortably on money my father had saved for my future. The rage, the injustice, it surged through me. Both, I said firmly. I want to pursue both criminal and civil action. What they did was wrong, and they should face consequences. The confrontation. Oh, that was something else. It happened in Mr. Greenberg's office. Diana arrived with her own attorney, this nervous-looking man who seemed completely overwhelmed. She maintained her composure, her polished facade, until Mr. Greenberg methodically began presenting the evidence. That's when her mask began to crack. These were legitimate business investments, she insisted. David would have wanted the company preserved for Samantha's future. Then why was there no formal investment agreement? Mr. Greenberg countered, his voice cutting. Why were the transfers concealed in the trust accounting? And why were personal expenses for Brandon and Zoe being paid from trust assets? Diana's attorney whispered urgently in her ear, but she brushed him off. I was doing what was best for the family. The business needed capital, and the trust was just sitting there. It was not just sitting there. I interjected, my voice rising, finally finding its power. It was my future. It was meant for my education and security, not for saving a failing business or buying Brandon a car. Diana's eyes narrowed, venomous. You were always so entitled, Samantha. Always expecting special treatment because you were David's precious daughter. He spoiled you. And look how you repay his memory, attacking the family business he built. Walter, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. His voice was calm, but deadly. The business was failing because of your mismanagement, Diana, not because of Samantha. David built a profitable company that you ran into the ground, and then you stole from his daughter to cover your mistakes. Diana turned on Walter, her expression pure hatred. You were always jealous of David's success, his family. That's why you swooped in to turn Samantha against me. You couldn't stand to see me carrying on his legacy. My brother and I had our differences, Walter said unfazed. But he would be disgusted by what you have done. Using his daughter's inheritance to prop up your failing business while she sleeps in her car? That is not carrying on any legacy David would recognize. The revelation that I had been homeless. For a fleeting moment, it seemed to pierce Diana's armor. Genuine shock flickered across her face. But it vanished quickly. If Samantha chose to live in her car rather than accept the reasonable boundaries of our home, that was her decision. The audacity! The meeting ended with Mr. Greenberg presenting Diana with two options: agree to a settlement including her immediate removal as trustee, full restitution of misappropriated funds, and her resignation from the family business, or face both civil and criminal proceedings. Diana's attorney finally managed to pull his client aside for a private consultation. When they returned, Diana grudgingly agreed to the settlement terms, though her eyes promised retribution. The legal process took several more weeks, but the results were comprehensive. Diana was removed as trustee, with Walter appointed in her place. The court ordered full restitution of all diverted funds plus interest. Diana was forced to sell her ownership in the family business to pay the judgment, with the company itself placed under professional management until I was ready to make decisions about its future. Despite agreeing to the settlement, Diana still faced criminal charges for fraud. The district attorney, armed with Mr. Greenberg's evidence, pursued the case independently. Diana eventually accepted a plea deal, probation, community service, and a permanent mark on her record that would prevent her from ever serving as a trustee or financial manager again. Throughout this incredibly difficult process, Walter supported me completely. He insisted I focus on rebuilding my life, on completing my education, while he handled all the heavy legal and financial details. Your father was always the responsible one, he told me one evening. He would have never let this happen if he had lived. The least I can do is help put things right. As we spent more time together, Walter shared insights about my father that I'd never known. They'd grown apart after Mom's death, partly because Walter had disapproved of Diana from the very beginning. I saw through her immediately, he admitted, but David was so lonely and vulnerable after Catherine died. When I tried to warn him, it only created distance between us. It's one of my greatest regrets that I didn't try harder to stay connected to both of you. Walter also revealed that he'd been diagnosed with cancer the year before my father died, explaining his withdrawal from family activities. I didn't want to burden David with my illness while he was still grieving Catherine. By the time I was in remission, Diana had already established her influence, and I was effectively pushed out. These raw, honest conversations helped me understand the complex family dynamics that had led to my situation. They also forged a new, incredibly powerful bond between Walter and me, a connection that began to heal some of the profound loss I had experienced. The restoration of my trust fund and the additional compensation from the settlement meant I could finally complete my education without financial worry. I moved into a small but comfortable apartment near campus. I donated most of the clothes and supplies I'd used during my homeless period, and slowly, gently, began to feel secure again. The family business, now under professional management, started to recover once it was freed from Diana's mishandling. The managers Walter hired provided regular reports, educating me about the company my father had built, so I could eventually decide whether to sell it or take an active role. As for Diana, Brandon, and Zoe, they moved to another state after the settlement. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they were living in much reduced circumstances, Diana's reputation in the business community completely tarnished by the legal proceedings. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, only profound relief that they were no longer part of my life. Rebuilding my life after months of homelessness and years of emotional abuse wasn't an overnight process. Even with financial security restored and a safe place to live, the psychological impacts lingered. I'd wake in a panic in my new apartment, momentarily disoriented, expecting to find myself in my car. I hoarded food. I kept an emergency bag packed, unable to fully trust that my situation was truly stable. Uncle Walter recognized these signs of trauma and gently, lovingly, suggested I consider therapy. There is no shame in seeking help, he said. What you went through would leave scars on anyone. With his encouragement, I began seeing Dr. Morales, a therapist specializing in family trauma and displacement. In those sessions, I learned to process the complex grief of losing both parents, the brutal betrayal by my stepfamily, and the raw fear and shame of my homeless period. Dr. Morales helped me understand that my hypervigilance, my anxiety, were normal responses to abnormal circumstances, not weaknesses or flaws in my character. You survived an incredibly difficult situation, she reminded me often. The coping mechanisms that helped you then may not serve you now, but they were valuable when you needed them. Now we can work on developing new tools for your current reality. Slowly, with professional guidance and Walter's unwavering support, I began to heal. I established new routines that nurtured, rather than depleted me. I reduced my work hours to a reasonable part-time schedule that complemented my studies, instead of competing with them. I learned to cook nutritious meals in my own kitchen, finding unexpected joy in the simple luxury of preparing food in a safe, warm space. My academic performance rebounded dramatically as my living situation stabilized. Professors who had noted my decline now commented on my renewed engagement and improved work. Dr. Patel, who had shown me such kindness during my hardest period, became a valued mentor, guiding my interest in business ethics toward a potential career path. Walter and I established a new family relationship, one different from, but equally valuable as, the one I had lost. We had dinner together every Sunday, creating our own beautiful tradition. He shared stories about my father's youth, their early business ventures. Through his memories, I gained a fuller picture of the man my father had been before grief had changed him. The legal resolution with Diana provided not just financial restitution, but a profound form of validation. The courts had recognized the wrong done to me, affirming that I had not imagined or exaggerated the mistreatment. This official acknowledgement helped counteract years of gaslighting and dismissal. As my immediate crisis receded, I began volunteering at a youth shelter, using my experience to help other young people facing housing insecurity. I understood their pride, their shame, their desperate need for normalcy in a way that most volunteers simply couldn't. Without revealing the full, raw details of my own story, I could offer genuine empathy and practical advice. This volunteer work eventually led to a part-time position coordinating services for college students experiencing homelessness, an invisible population, larger than most people realize. The work was so meaningful, so healing, allowing me to transform my painful experience into something constructive. My academic focus shifted slightly. My personal experiences deeply informed my professional interests. I added courses in nonprofit management and social entrepreneurship to my business curriculum, envisioning a career that would balance financial success with social impact. My senior thesis examined housing insecurity among college students, drawing critical attention to a growing problem while proposing practical solutions. Graduation day was a triumph I had once feared might never come. Walter sat proudly in the audience as I crossed the stage to receive my diploma with honors. In that moment, I felt my father's presence so strongly. His dream for my education, finally fulfilled, despite all obstacles. After graduation, I faced a decision about the family business. With Walter's guidance, I had learned enough about its operations to understand its potential and challenges. Rather than selling it or stepping directly into management, I chose a middle path. I retained ownership, but installed an experienced management team, setting clear ethical guidelines and employee-centered policies. I would serve on the board and learn the business gradually while pursuing my own career path and social enterprise. The trust fund that had been the source of so much conflict was now under Walter's careful stewardship, with transparent reporting and joint decision-making. When I turned 25, the remaining inheritance transferred to my control, a prospect that no longer filled me with anxiety. Walter had taught me financial management skills my father never had the chance to share, preparing me to handle my inheritance responsibly. Through this entire journey of recovery and rebuilding, I learned profound lessons that would shape the rest of my life. I learned that family isn't just defined by blood or legal ties. It's defined by love, by loyalty. Walter became more family to me than Diana ever was, despite her marriage to my father. I learned the immense value of asking for help, a lesson that did not come easily to someone who had survived through fierce independence. Accepting Walter's assistance, Dr. Morales's guidance, my friend's unwavering support, it didn't diminish my strength. It multiplied it. I also learned about the insidious, creeping nature of emotional abuse. How it distorts reality, slowly erodes your self-worth, so subtly that victims often don't even recognize what's happening until the damage is severe. This understanding made me both more compassionate toward others and fiercely protective of my own boundaries. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that resilience isn't about weathering hardship alone. It's about finding ways to keep moving forward, no matter the obstacles. Sometimes that means sleeping in your car and showering at a gym. Sometimes it means accepting a spare bedroom and legal help from a long-lost uncle. The strength isn't in the specific strategy, it's in the stubborn refusal to surrender to circumstances. Today, 5 years after Walter found me working at that coffee shop, my life bears little resemblance to my darkest days. I have a fulfilling career working with a foundation that addresses youth homelessness. I own a small, but beautiful, apartment in a city I love. I have meaningful relationships with friends who know my full story and love me anyway. And I have a relationship with Walter that has enriched both our lives immeasurably. The pain of my past hasn't disappeared entirely. I still have moments of grief for my parents, flashes of anger at Diana's betrayal, occasional nightmares about living in my car. But these emotional echoes no longer control my life or define my identity. They are simply part of a story that shaped me, but does not limit me. If you are facing your own impossible situation right now, please know that circumstances can change in ways you cannot even imagine. The person who might help you could be someone you haven't spoken to in years, or someone you haven't even met yet. The strength you need might come from resources you don't yet recognize within yourself. Have you ever experienced a moment when everything changed because someone noticed your struggle, someone saw you? Or have you been that person for someone else? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what another viewer needs to hear today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that even the darkest situations can lead to unexpected light. Thank you for listening to my story. Take care.